whip landed ferociously on the poor man's shoulders, with the lashes falling on his body like rain. Soon, he was bleeding from the blows, and spectators saw thousands of streams of blood running down his dark shoulders. As the whip swung through the air, some blood droplets splashed onto the onlookers. The spectators, who were disgusted by Quasimodo, showed no sympathy. They kept mocking, cursing, and throwing stones at him. Quasimodo struggled in his chains, glaring fiercely at the crowd in an attempt to intimidate them, but the prolonged whipping and torture made him extremely thirsty, and he shouted hoarsely and angrily, "Water!" Here, Hugo provides a thought-provoking description. This pitiable cry did not elicit any sympathy. Instead, it made the crowd laugh even harder. This is the coldness of the spectators. Everyone thought Quasimodo's current appearance was not pitiful, but rather made him appear more grotesque and unapproachable. They were happy to see someone like Quasimodo suffer, enjoying watching, his purple-red face drenched in sweat, eyes wild, mouth foaming with rage and pain. It was like watching a trapped beast. They did not see him as a fellow human being, a concrete person. Quasimodo was so thirsty that half of his tongue stuck out of his mouth. At this moment, not a single kind-hearted man or woman from the crowd dared to offer the suffering man a cup of water. The loathsome steps of the scaffold were considered shameful and repulsive, and good people were unwilling to step on them. It's not hard to see Hugo's satire in this passage. He criticizes how difficult it is for people to empathize with others and understand their suffering. Kindness at times can be so hard to manifest. When Quasimodo shouted desperately for water a second and third time, a dramatic scene unfolded. The crowd suddenly parted to make way for a strangely dressed girl. She was very beautiful, accompanied by a snow-white goat with golden horns and holding a small drum. Who is this? Esmeralda. Quasimodo's single eye flashed as he recognized her as the girl he had tried to abduct the previous night. He vaguely realized that it was because of this incident that he was now chained here and being flogged. Therefore, Quasimodo believed that this girl had come to take revenge on him, just like everyone else, and would start beating him, but the girl silently approached Quasimodo, who twisted his body to avoid her. Instead of hitting him, she took out a gourd from her chest and gently brought it to the poor man's cracked lips. What was she doing? She was giving Quasimodo water. At this moment, people saw a large tear rolling out of the always dry, burning single eye of the monster and slowly flowing down his long, wrinkled, ugly cheek. This was the first tear Quasimodo had ever shed in his tragic life. He felt the power of kindness and love. The story, as it progresses to this point, shows these important characters being called together by fate, entangling them further and leading step by step towards the climax. What happens next? When we naturally focus on the two main characters, the pitiful Quasimodo and the kind-hearted Esmeralda, we might overlook another crucial character in the novel, which is the Archdeacon Claude Frollo. In the year the story takes place, Claude Frollo is around 36 years old, already a middle-aged man. Hugo describes him as follows. Claude Frollo was no longer the simple student of the Torchy Theological Seminary, no longer the gentle protector of a child, nor the dreamy young man who was familiar with some things and unfamiliar with others. He had become a severe and brooding priest, a soul keeper, and a grim and terrifying figure. When he crossed his arms and lowered his head to his chest, people could only see his bald forehead. As he solemnly and thoughtfully walked slowly under the high arch of the choir, everyone trembled in his presence. Yes, he was very stern and seemed not easy to deal with. In the bell tower of Notre-Dame de Paris, Claude Frollo had set up a secret little room for himself, dedicated to studying alchemy. Let's take a look at a medieval alchemist's workshop, which is quite unique and seldom found in other novels. It was a gloomy room with a comfortable chair and a large table, several compasses, and distillers. Animal bones hung from the ceiling, and a globe rolled on the floor. There were glass bottles filled with various colored potions, some with golden leaves trembling inside. Several skulls lay on parchments covered with strange writings and portraits. A pile of manuscripts with dog-eared corners spread out on the table, along with some obscure maxims written in Latin or Greek. Claude was obsessed with the study of alchemy then. Once, King Louis XI came to visit Claude in disguise, led by his royal physician, to ask questions about alchemy. As Claude was explaining to the king the mysterious symbols hidden in many church buildings, he suddenly sighed and pointed with one hand to the open book on the table and with the other to Notre Dame, saying that this one was going to destroy that one. His implication is that the invention of the printing press would ultimately replace the art of architecture. We can reasonably assume that this is Hugo's genuine sentiment, as he expresses a profound sorrow over the decline of medieval architectural art. Hugo writes, "The thoughts of each generation are no longer written in the same way or with the same materials. Even the solid and enduring works written in stone will give way to those created with paper and printing, which are even more solid and enduring. One art is destined to overthrow another." We can see that Hugo is writing about the transformations of his time, with technological advancements bringing about significant changes. He metaphorically compares Notre-Dame de Paris to a book, starting from the earliest monuments to the grand cathedrals. He devotes extensive passages to describe the entire history of Parisian architectural art. Thus, the novel Notre-Dame de Paris holds research value and cultural significance beyond its literary merits. In the preface, Hugo tirelessly calls for the preservation of ancient monumental buildings and declares that this is one of the primary goals of his novel and one of his lifelong pursuits. It shows that Hugo had a grand vision. Returning to the novel, since the first time Claude Frollo laid eyes on Esmeralda, he fell uncontrollably in love with her. This caused Frollo immense anguish, leading him to instruct Quasimodo to kidnap the girl. He then begged the archbishop to issue a decree to expel her and even meticulously researched ancient witchcraft cases, seeking justifications to prove she should be burned at the stake. Ultimately, all his efforts were in vain, as Esmeralda continued to dance in the place de Grève every day. Claude found himself unable to rid his mind and heart of this beautiful girl. His misfortune was intensified when he discovered that Esmeralda had fallen in love with another man, Captain Phoebus, the officer who saved her that night.